7:38. Joining us now to talk about the Russian invasion of Ukraine is Tom O'Connor, senior writer at Foreign Policy at Newsweek. Good morning. Thanks for joining us this morning. I think this is going tougher for Putin than he thought, and our military analyst said that even if Russia were to be victorious, it would be very difficult to hold Ukraine. I'm wondering if the powers that be are discussing maybe a different end game in all this.
Sure, yeah. So, ahead of this whole invasion, we had looked at some of the military assessments as well, talking to U.S. Insiders and also some experts out there. And what's kind of puzzling is that Russia really did not pursue the kind of intervention that we had expected. It certainly did approach from the same axes in a way, the same fronts, but the amount of force that it's chosen to apply has been somewhat limited and certainly not in line with previous Russian operations in different areas, such as Chechnya or Syria. So what we're seeing right now is sort of a held back Russian military. Now, we saw that obviously the first round of talks had started to occur yesterday. There might be a second round sometime soon. But Russia is sending in their reinforcements, and we see that 40-mile-long convoy marching toward Kiev right now. That could be the signal of a much different Russian military operation, the one that maybe we had expected from the onset of this. So I think that until that larger sort of salvo of attacks and ground troops takes place, then I think that we really have to see how the Ukrainians will stand.
How concerning is this threat of nuclear weapons, this veiled threat? How seriously do you take that from Putin?
Yeah, well, I think any time that nuclear weapons are mentioned in a conflict that involves a NATO and Russian component, certainly it's something to be alarmed about. Obviously, part of Russia's narrative going into this was the expansion of NATO, and not just the expansion of NATO, but also the deployment of U.S. nuclear weapons in NATO states. The U.S. maintains nuclear weapons in a number of European countries, and now we've seen the entrance of B-52 nuclear-capable bombers on the eastern flank of NATO. So it is something to be concerned about, and I know that President Biden said that this is not something that we should be immediately alarmed about. And I don't think that President Putin is planning any sort of nuclear action. At the same time, though, when these tensions are high and nuclear tensions are high specifically, the risk for miscalculation becomes quite a catastrophic one.
Tom, real quick, you mentioned that convoy. That's a target-rich environment. I'm wondering what's the latest on fighter jets from the EU for Ukrainian pilots?
Yeah, so there's been conflicting reports. First, we heard 3 EU nations saying that they weren't planning to provide them. Now we're hearing the Ukrainian Armed Forces saying they have secured those jets. The question is, though, if Russia's already in the capital, what does this conflict look like afterwards? If Russia has in some ways encircled Ukraine's leadership, we could see a very different strategy from Ukraine. Sure, it could absolutely involve a more partisan guerrilla warfare techniques. There might still be intact formations after the Russians really try to encircle some of those troops. But as to what the Ukrainians choose to do with those jets and how Russia responds, I think that's still up for debate. Russia has very advanced air defense systems, and it has not employed them, as I said earlier, in full force. The Ukrainians are still flying some of their own aviation, something that the U.S. analysts and many other analysts did not expect at this point. But I stress that part of that's, of course, because Ukraine has demonstrated incredible resolve, but at the same time, Russia has not used its full force. And if that's the case, it might be a very different conflict moving forward.
All right, Tom, we appreciate you joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll be back right after this.